technical staff is here. We're trying on Facebook. Here we go. So I can get the notification. Okay, man, I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Off the Record this evening. We have a very esteemed and illustrious guest today, who is an honor to interview you, Brother Christopher. He is the student first officer in Chicago, and he's a history teacher, skilled tradesman, but what I know him from when I was younger was watching him command the soldiers of the Detroit FOI for many years, and I just would rewatch the DVDs over and over again to learn your moves and learn your cadence. Take credit for it behind your back and not let you know.
Man, I don't own anything, brother. It was probably a cadence I got from somebody else. So.
Okay, yes, sir. Okay, Brother Chris, we're gonna get straight into it.
Yes, sir.
When did you accept the teachings?
Yes, sir. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Brother Joshua, for having me on. First of all, I appreciate it. I'm humble. And that's the best question to start with.
Yes,
I came into Islam in 1994, the fall of 1994. So it was about a good year before the Million Man March. I was 16 years old, high schooler. You know, I was really searching that year and the years prior for the truth. I was searching for God. And in the process of you know, when I was about 15, maybe 16, things were happening in my life that just put me in the direction to really search. And I came across the minister's DVDs, which they used to play in when I was in Detroit, which is my hometown.
Yes, sir.
The cable station used to play the minister every Tuesday. And so this is back before DVDs and streaming and DVR and all of that. So I had to program my VCR. I had to program my VCR to actually tape the minister every Tuesday. And I would go to my high school job after I got out of school and come home, and I would watch the minister. And then, of course, I bought the Final Call, started to read, go to the bookstore. And then, you know, over a period of time, brother, I found myself wanting more and more to become a Muslim and convicted by the truth I heard, and eventually made my way to Mosque number 1. The rest is really history. That's the short version.
Yes, sir. Okay, yes, sir. And we thank you. My sister Miriam says, thank you for this interview. We grew up watching his drill routines over and over, still know his cadences. Absolutely. Okay. How did you become the drill instructor in Detroit?
Okay, so the story on that is there's a brother who was actually my squad leader when I came into the mosque, Brother Marcel Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him. He passed about 6 years ago, the year I relocated to Chicago. And he was, man, a crack squad leader, officer, and he was the DI for Detroit. And something happened the year. So I drilled with the drill team in 1996. That was my first year competing in the drill competition, was 1996. I drilled, but I was not the DI. Brother Marcel was the DI, and we did pretty good that year, but we didn't place. And so that next year, I can't remember what happened. Brother Marcel was set to do it that year, but he had some personal, he had just gotten married. Some of his personal challenges came up in his life at that time. And we didn't have a DI because he just couldn't make the commitment to do it that year. And so the first officer at that time, which is Brother Carlin, he said, look, brother, you got to call it, you know? And prior to that, he had me called at a squad meeting. This is back at the 2 o'clock meeting time when we used to have squad meeting at 9 a.m. And then we would drill, we would go through our squad training, we'd go out in the field, and then we would come back to the mosque by 2 o'clock, right? That was the regiment every Sunday. And so he had me call cadence one Sunday morning and said, man, brother, you can really call. And, you know, Marcel was still the DI, but then when he couldn't make it, I was appointed. And at that point, I had to do it. So that video you had posted on Twitter, that was actually my first year as the DI, believe it or not. Yep. I was 17 years old. Praise Allah.
Oh, that's the deal. You were 17. Okay, yes, sir. That was good. Okay. That makes it more impressive. All right.
Let me think. I was 17 going on my 18th birthday, if I remember correctly. Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Walaikum salam, Sister Anissa, Fuquan, peace. Okay, excellent. Now the climate in the 90s, how was that? How did the streets of Detroit receive you all when it came to drill?
Oh man, I mean the '90s, the climate with drill was just bananas, brother Joshua. It was well. Before I even go to the streets, I gotta say now these were the days in the early '90s, and some of the other DIs like Daryl in Atlanta, who used to be in DC, of course, brother Vertis. You know, some of the other DIs that were around at that time. Man, it was you coming to Chicago. There was no preliminaries set before you got to Chicago. We didn't send in a video. There was no regional drill off. Like this was, you came in, all the cities from around the nation would come in on that Friday night in MUI. You probably remember, you're probably a little shorty. And every team had to drill in the preliminaries, regardless, on that Friday night. It would be crowded. You'd be in Muhammad University and you drill, and that was the first night. And they would determine who the finalists were that first night. And then after that first night, you would go into, and if you placed, you would go Saturday night, and then you would drill in the final drill competition. And then whoever won at certain times would drill before the minister on that, you know, for the believers meeting. So that was another element of it as well. So it was just really, you know, intense in terms of that. I like the way we do it now with because I feel like it's more organized, it's more systematic, and it makes for a more polished drill competition and show. But man, there was something about the energy. It was very raw, you know. And in terms of the street in Detroit, we always got love and respect whenever we would drill in the community. Whenever we would drill, particularly on details. I mean, a lot of our drilling was on details. It wasn't necessarily at events a lot of times. We would just, it would be 20, 30 brothers in the middle of a street, you know, and we would drill in front of the people, you know. We would go through with our final calls and flyers or whatever. And then after we hit a block or after we hit a street, once we got the people out of their houses, you know, or apartments or whatever, then we would drill in the middle of the street. And it was just electric. The same effect it has today, you know. It's that same effect when we're on it and when we do what we do, which is drill. So praise be to Allah.
Excellent. Now, when you're saying you all are drilling when you were drilling in the community, 30 brothers going on a push, were you making up routines? You call them basics? Like how did that come about? Like you just fell out and just started calling, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so on the details, you know, a lot of the brothers on details and in the FOI know, you know, those brothers may not necessarily be always your top drillers. It may be your top. You may have some of your drillers who are, you know how to drill, but they're not on the drill team. And so I didn't do a whole lot of preset routines in those settings. A lot of times it would be the basics. And I always said, and my philosophy with drill was, you know, if you can master the basics, you can do anything because you can mix the basics up and make it as complicated as you want, right? If you can do a salute, now you can do a series, you know, you can do a domino effect salute, you can do variations of salutes and things of that nature. But if you know how to salute, you can make that into a complicated or sophisticated, maybe a better word, routine. And so we would do basic salutes. I would always call the things. I wouldn't call something that the brothers wouldn't know. So, you know, I wouldn't go out in the field and call a slide step if I knew all the brothers didn't know how to do a slide step. Or I wouldn't call assembly to the rear, you know, or certain moves that I know some of the brothers may not have practiced. So I would always do the basics, your face movements, salutes, flank movements, all of those things that I knew we did on a weekly basis at FOI class, which FOI class was the basics. If you came to class, that's where you learned how to drill in squad meeting, you know, so.
Excellent. Yes, and during this time, were you, who was the minister and the captain in Detroit at this time period?
Okay, so yeah, so when I first came into mosque in 1994, we were under the leadership of student minister Rasul Muhammad, who of course was relocated to Miami in the mid 90s. And so when he transitioned to Miami, 7th region, Minister Dawood Muhammad took over, who was the assistant minister for years at Mosque Number 1. And in fact, when Brother Rasul was out of town, which often he would be in Mexico and he would travel, Minister Dawood would hold it down, Minister David X at that time, and was a powerful, powerful teacher. I mean, both of those brothers. So I came in under the voice of Minister Rasul with a strong dose of Dawood in there. And then the captain was at that time, Captain Thomas Muhammad. Eventually, the minister named him Majid. Abdul Majid Muhammad, Captain Majid, Captain Emeritus now in Detroit. And so that was the captain in those years throughout the 90s, really the entirety of the 90s, yep, into the 2000s.
Okay, excellent. I want to get to the audience 1 second. Like salam to Deontay. Since Naima says, how did you create your cadence, your cadences? Were you inspired by music, other DIs, etc.?
Well, it was absolutely music. A lot of people don't know this. I would say some know, those who know me, who grew up with me in Detroit, but I was a rapper. I was a rapper growing up, and I was a writer. And so definitely music played a part, a huge part, because in music, I mean, I was gonna say rap in music, because cadence is rhythm. Cadence is, like when I teach drill to the brothers, you know, you have the drum, you have the melody of the cadence, you have bars, you have rhyme and stanzas, you have all of that in drill. And so I was a rapper, but then also I learned to love the melody side of it. I didn't really sing growing up, but then I learned to appreciate that as well, because that, you know, to me, that's where the soulful, really inspirational cadences come from. The rapping is cool. And I hear a lot of the new young drill teams, you know, they do a lot of raps and they do a lot of rhymes. You could hear it. But the melody is important too. And that's where Brother Vertus was always good. He had that melodic voice, that melodic drill cadence voice. And that's the thing that was always impactful for him in terms of his DIing, in my opinion. So it was definitely music, rap and music. Yep. I'm hip hop generation. So, I mean, I came in under, you know, I heard Islam through rappers, like many of the brothers who came in the early 90s. I mean, I heard Islam through Brand Nubian, and I heard Islam through Cam. I heard Islam through Ice Cube. I heard Islam through MC Ren, who had joined the nation in '94, the year I came into mosque. So there were a lot of West and East Coast rappers. Of course, KRS-One, of course, Public Enemy, Poor Righteous Teacher. So I came in under hip hop. And so because of that, it had a big influence on my calling cadence and my desire to even call cadence in the first place.
Okay, excellent. Excellent question. I never knew that you were a rapper. That makes a lot of sense, because a lot of DIs are musically inclined. Walaikum salam, Brother Benny. All right, thank you. Is there FOI? Is there an FOI component in Oregon or Washington State? I don't know, ma'am. We'll find out. Brother Hashim says the greetings. Brother T. Farrell says, what's up, Brother Quick? Brother Chris.
T. Farrell, okay. Yeah, send the greetings back. I know Brother T. Farrell and Brother Hashim. Praise be to Allah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
And Brother Benny made sure the greetings, and another brother, Khalid Shakur. Okay, praise yes, sir. When you, with Brother Vertus, so now as a DI to another DI, you backstage can be hot. Sometimes if you don't place right, the spirit might shift off and you might be bad at the other teams. How did you keep the spirit of brotherhood after the drill competition and during the off season, so there wouldn't be no animosity between you and other cities?
Wow. I honestly, brother, it was so much, it was love and brotherhood. I mean, I always had respect for the other drill instructors. That's yes, Brother Curtis, that's Brother Michael, former first officer in Chicago. I mean, we were rivals for many years, as you remember. And I always just respected the other brothers. Like I really, to me, it's like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, all of us were born to do something perfect, and no two snowflakes are alike. And so Vertus's style wasn't necessarily my style, you know, but it was beautiful, and I loved it and I admired it. You know, same thing with Brother Michael. You know, there were always DIs that I, you know, and I won't say that. I think we fed off of each other. You know, I think we were one of the, at least in the 90s, and I could be wrong, because I got some, I'm sure there's some drill heads on here that might correct me. I know that in the 80s, I saw a video of the Supreme captain in the drill team with flags, but I believe we were one of the first that really made the flag bearing a critical part of the drill, or a consistent part of the drill. You saw a lot of teams later on with the flags, but other teams did it before we did it. But I'm just saying, like, there are elements, you'll see another team do something, and you get ideas, but then you might mix it up. You know, it's kind of like now with hip hop, you know, no rapper can say that they weren't influenced by another rapper. You know, all rappers grew up admiring another rapper, and then they even may have sounded like that rapper up to a certain point until they found themselves. And so for me, it was just always love. I never had the thought. I mean, we had our war face on though. Like we didn't, it wasn't a whole lot of fraternization and kicking it backstage. I mean, we were in our corner, they were in their corner, you know, and then afterwards, you know, we would greet and we would laugh and we would joke, but we definitely still wanted to win. It wasn't like we were all, you know, happy-go-lucky and just kicking it with each other, but we definitely respected and loved each other. And now today, when I see these brothers, man, we laugh and we joke and we talk about those days. So, yes, sir.
Okay, excellent. Now, in Atlanta, I can't speak on many other cities, but when I was in Chicago, I would compete against Sister Carmen when we were younger as the DIs to make, you know, to be competitive against the same city, but from the different gender. And now in Atlanta, we compete against the sisters. We always wanted, the FOI wanted to be the best. How did you deal with wanting to be the best in your city when you had Vanguard drill teams as well?
Oh, man. Well, I got to say this, brother, and this is just my humble opinion, but the Vanguard has always been the most competitive, in my opinion, category. You know, and the FOI, I got to say, in recent years, have really come a long way. A lot of people will criticize and say, oh, well, the newer FOI, a lot of times the drill movements may not be the classic traditional. A lot of the drill teams, like from my era, we lifted our legs up really high. There was a certain slow cadence. It was the emphasis of the stump, you know. And so when I talk to a lot of the DIs from my era, a lot of them feel like the newer DIs implement a lot of kind of show business into the routines, right? A lot of stuff that may not be traditional drill, but in my opinion, I think it's become a lot more competitive on the FOI side, you know, in terms of the closeness of the drill. Like New York's drill team the last few years has been serious. You all in Atlanta, of course. You know, we've been missing the last couple of years in Chicago. Detroit has been back up in there a couple of times. Under Brother Dawood, who ironically, when I was the drill instructor in Detroit for the FOI, the senior FOI, he was the junior FOI drill instructor, and they were like perennial champions in the early 90s. Anybody knows that junior FOI team from Detroit in like 93, 94 knows Brother Dawood. So, you know, I feel like it's gotten a little more competitive in that sense. And part of that is because the Vanguard, I think, have always had such tight competition that I think in some ways the brothers have, whether they admit it or not, I think have emulated certain degrees of the complexity of the drill routines. When you talk about formations, when you talk about, you know, a lot of the complicated sequences, all of that, you know, I think has evolved on the brother side. But that said, I think that the brothers still have maintained that, you know, militancy and will continue to grow, you know, in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to see this year how the drill competition is going to look. Chicago's in, my hometown, Detroit is in, and I believe New York are the only three I heard announced. So it's going to be exciting. Yep.
Excellent. Now, how do you feel as a DI when you see myself, other people who came up under you, and you see some of your influence in our, or you see your DNA in our cadence or in our style? How does that make you feel?
Well, I don't, Brother Joshua, on all humility, I don't really, when I hear you, when I hear some of the other younger DIs, I don't really think, oh man, you know, I hear if my influence is there, all praise is due to Allah. And I'm sure they are there. No, I'm serious. And I'm not trying to play humble, but when I hear you all, I hear the new, I hear how Allah has blessed you with gifts and talents to do what you all do in terms of drill. And so for the younger DIs, man, I mean, it's receive, obey, and pass on to the sentinel who relieves me, right? Okay. All orders from the commanding officer of the day, and non-commissioned officer of the guard only. So I just see it as like a passing of the baton to the younger FOI. Any influence I have, man, all praise is due to Allah. You know, I'm humbled, you know, and then there will be brothers that you know, 10 years from now, they'll say, man, Josh, you know, they'll interview you and they'll say, man, your drills were the reason I got into drill. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, that's Islam, you know, praise be to Allah.
Excellent. Okay. You are an educator.
Yes, sir.
the history
Oh,
teacher.
can I say one more thing on the drill before we get into the education thing real quick?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I got to say this as an addendum. When I was in Detroit, one of the things that I found challenging when we went to the regional drill offs, and let me explain, because when I talked to you earlier about when we would come into Chicago, and this is just a little footnote, you would have all the cities from around the nation drill, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
so the challenge when we went from that was a lot of times, if you had a city that was really good in a region, but you could only choose one regional city to represent that region,
Yes,
a lot of times you may have teams that make it to the finals, but then that regional city may be the best in that region, but there may be another city that could have actually placed or been better than a lot of the other cities, if you follow what I'm saying. But because they couldn't get past the region, they weren't able to drill. You understand? And so that was one of the challenges we had. And I'll just be honest, in Detroit, you know, when you're in headquarters region, you know, it's very, you almost have to, man, you got to come in on a cape, jump through hoops. No, seriously. And I'm in Chicago now. I'm in Chicago. But see, the thing that was challenging for us was breaking through because of the fact that, you know, we were in that regional city. And so that's one of the things that I think's evolved. But when they went to the videos, sending the videos in, now that's a beautiful thing, because now cities can send their videos in, and if it makes the cut, it makes the cut. So we're growing and evolving as a nation, and we'll continue to do so. Praise be to Allah.
Okay, excellent. And speaking of that, I was looking at one of the DVDs of the drill competition, and I saw my father say that you all didn't make it in the region or something like that, but somehow you still got to drill and present, even though that you didn't make it from the region as Savior's Day. Is that correct? I'm gonna make sure.
Well, let me give you the straight up history on that. Your father, who was the supreme captain at that time, Brother Abdul Sharif, of course, one of those years, I think it was 98 or 99, it was so tight. They said that Chicago had only won by 1 point, right? This is at the preliminaries at Miami University. And the supreme captain at that time, Brother Sharif, he walked up to me afterwards. He said, brother, he said, I want you all to put your routines together. And I want you all to put something together so that Detroit and Chicago, he said, it was so close. He said, I couldn't really even tell the difference. Mm-hmm. But it was a point. We lost by a point. And so it didn't materialize, you know, that year. We weren't able to do it and connect to drill together. But he was always an advocate for, in my opinion, he was fair. He was always very balanced. And in fact, in that video you show, when I asked permission to drill the brothers, he was right there. He was the one that I, of course, requested permission to drill the men for. And so he wanted us to drill together, Detroit and Chicago. This was back in probably 98, 99. It didn't happen, but he did still want us to drill at the drill competition. So it was kind of weird, you know. Allah blessed us, even though we didn't break through the regional that year, we still were blessed to drill in like an exhibition fashion at that year's Savior's Day. I think it was 98 or 99. And so me and Michael, we still talk about it to this day, you know, but praise to Allah.
Yes, sir. Brother T. Farrell says changing the guard. Naima says Brother Chris needs to be a judge. T. Farrell says Brother Joshua Stream. Thank you, Brother T. Farrell. Okay, so as you being a history teacher and an educator, yes, how has drill helped you and assisted you with that? Your training helped you, you know, in your career?
Oh, wow. That's an excellent question. I don't know if I've thought about it that way, but I'll say this. In the 3 years prior to me relocating to Chicago, I was actually the assistant minister in Detroit. I had been a lieutenant in Detroit as well as the drill instructor for many years. And then I transitioned into the ministry. I was the assistant minister under Minister Rasul when he came back to Detroit for 3 years between 2007 and 2010. And so when I went into teaching, I thought that my background in the ministry, I've always loved the word and passionate and loved to teach. And so I thought my background in the ministry would be my strong suit in teaching, right? But the funny thing about it is that's part of it. But when I got in the classroom, I realized that my experience as a lieutenant and as a drill instructor, now that you've mentioned that side of it, was the biggest aspect of my training, because you got to be able to keep order. You can't learn in an unstructured environment. And the thing about it is I do teach in the public school system. And so when we're in the mosque, when we're in FOI class, when we're at a believers meeting, we have a certain culture of discipline that's natural to the FOI and to the MGT. So it's easy for us to sit down and listen to a whole lecture, right? Whether it's Minister Ishmael, the minister, whatever, Minister Nuri, whoever is teaching, it's easy for us to listen because we have a certain culture of discipline that we have. When you go into the public sector, a lot of times, especially when it's students that you see every single day and they get common and used to you, it was my training as a drill instructor and really as a lieutenant that was very, I would say even more valuable than my background in the ministry, because that aspect of, you got to learn personalities. You have to learn how to, keep things in order when you have a class of 30 students, right? And you got to have structure. You got to have procedures. A lot of that stuff is very, very critical when you're an educator. And so it has a lot to do with how I teach. A lot of my voice, for example, one of the things, when you become a teacher, a lot of your strong teachers, a lot of it is your voice, and you're strong, what some teachers would call strong voice. A lot of that came from me being a DI. You just have to speak with a certain strength in your voice and a certain command. And when you do that, you'll get students to really adhere to what you're saying just off of that a lot of times. Just the strength of your voice. If you're not timid and you have a certain emphasis in when you give instructions. And so a lot of that came from drill, and a lot of that came from being a lieutenant. Yeah.
Excellent. What advice would you give to future fathers?
Wow. I would say that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan wants to define fatherhood as, father means further. If you take the word father and you change a couple of letters, you have the word further. And so when I think about being a father, I've always thought about it as, what can I do to make sure that my children are farther ahead than I was when I was their age, right? What things that I experienced when I was young. And I think to be a father, you have to be humble enough and honest enough with yourself to know what things you struggle with as a young man. And if you're a father, if you're not honest in assessing the things that were painful to you as a youth, right? The things that were struggles for you, whether it's heartbreak, whether it's, maturity, and whether it's anything, the streets, whatever it is that you had to deal with as a young person, go back to that experience and think about, what can I do to ensure that my children aren't working from the same level of knowledge that I was working from, right? And so each generation should push the next generation further. So father means further. And so my approach to fatherhood is trying to establish things so that my sons and my daughters can be further ahead than I was. And so far, they've done that. My oldest daughter is a junior in college, and she's only 19 years old. My other daughter, my next in line, she's set to graduate this year, and she's 16, not even 17 yet. And so they've done so much more than I did, even at my age, even though I joined the nation at 16. So father means further. And I try to really just, beyond anything, if you're not an example, it's going to be hard to get, your children to follow what it is that you're attempting to get them to do if you're not an example first, So those are just a few things I would say.
Excellent. You have sons as well. So what is the difference as far as your approach to raising daughters versus raising sons?
Yeah, so my oldest 3 are girls and my youngest 2 are boys. I would say with boys, we've yet to get to that teenage, age, and I'm interested to see how that's going to look. But with boys, it's just I feel like it's natural for me to kind of know the things that boys like to do. My sons, they love the same things I remember growing up loving to do, which is build things with Legos, or run around and play sports or wrestle, or nowadays, of course, video games. I mean, when I was young, we had Atari, then Nintendo. And so these are things that I can relate to a large degree. I think it's a different animal in terms of the level of the technology, obviously, today. And so for me now, the challenge is looking at the technology and making sure it doesn't become, beyond what it could be of a help, spending too much time on devices and things of that nature. But I would say with the girls, as a father, you're thinking about, man, how this world is going to try to eat them up. You know, when you think about what young men do and what young men think. And so because of that, you become very protective. And so for my daughters, you know, I mean, when my daughter went to college, I mean, my big concern was her defending herself, her knowing how to fight, right? Her being able to fight off a rapist or somebody that might run up on her. Being afraid. I know with my girls, I'm sometimes afraid to allow them to do certain things, like jump to catch the bus. I grew up catching the bus, you know, me and my sisters. But like, there are certain things I don't want them to do because I feel like, you know, of course, you think about things that could happen to them. But at the end of the day, Allah is in control, and you have to, as a parent, what I've learned is you have to let go, and you have to really know that Allah is protecting them. That's not to say be foolish and just allow them in any old type of environment or things of that nature. We have to be protectors as fathers, but you also have to know that you can't control everything, you know, and that sometimes they have to experience certain things, you know, for them to really come into their own faith and their own belief, because I came into Islam of my own volition. I mean, Allah, certainly, it was his will that I came into Islam at the call of the minister. But I had the different experience of growing up outside of the mosque. And so for me, when I came into Islam, I didn't really look back. You know, for me, of course, we struggle. And the reason I say didn't really look back is because there are elements of things that we continue to grow. You know, I can't say that I completely dropped every single thing, and I'm continuing to grow and evolve as a Muslim. That's Islam. But I would say that my desire to drink, smoke, hang out, do some of the things that my fellow high schoolers and those who were in college were doing, I didn't have that desire anymore because I would say what's the word? The attractiveness of the world had kind of worn off on me. Whereas with my children and children who come up in the mosque, what I discovered is for many, you know, they grow up in the mosque but they also listen to music, they watch television. So there are aspects of this world that sometimes can be attractive and tempting for them. And sometimes we just have to be patient and let things run their course, man. You know, Islam comes after all else fails, you know? Sir. So for our children, you know, sometimes they have to experience some things. But with my daughters, man, you think about being super protective. And with your sons, you know, you think about them really not making the same mistakes you made as a young man. Yep.
Excellent. What advice would you give to future husbands?
Man, that's a big one. I would say you got to let your ego go. You got to listen. Most times our wives are right. And we don't really want to admit it. You know, many years early in my marriage, a lot of the arguments and things that took place were over stuff that if I would have just, number one, been on my deen as a Muslim, you know, a lot of times we have to be on our discipline as husbands. And if we're on our prayers, if we're studying, you know, if we're being an example in terms of trying to reflect the character of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, most of our problems will be gone right off of that. But that said, a lot of times it's communication. You know, we have to learn to listen and apologize when you're wrong. You know, don't hold on to grudges. Don't hold on to things. Compliment, you know, and just really listen. That's one of the biggest things I could say to the husbands is listen, because, you know, if you don't have good communication, then you're going to have a problem. And most of the problems we have in marriage are because we're not listening to the other party. And that's on both the brothers and the sister side. But I think as men, sometimes we have a tendency to just, if it's something we don't understand in that moment or something that we don't agree with, we defer to the ego. Sometimes we defer to just, you know, our position in the household. And a lot of times we're wrong. And we have to just listen and think about it, you know, and weigh it and communicate. So that's just one of the things I would give as far as advice.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
And I thank you all, and I thank everyone for watching who's tuned in on Facebook Live. Brother Christopher, what advice would you give to the junior FOI, the younger FOI, and the FOI in general as far as drill and moving into the future?
Before we can even talk about drill, I would say be a Muslim. be a Muslim. That's the most important thing, is to strive to live Islam.
Yes, sir.
We love drill because drill was a reflection of the discipline of the FOI and the idea that we were being obedient to Allah and his servant in our midst, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so drill is just it's really, there was an instance where the minister compared drill to almost like a choir. You know, you go to church and you have a choir, and the choir is important, it's inspirational, you know, it's worship, it's praise, but at the end of the day, it's symbol. It's not necessarily substance. And one of the things that I would like to see for the young drillers, I think the drill will go much farther if we embrace the whole aspect of drill, meaning we decide that we're going to be that disciplined in all aspects of our lives. And so I would say for the young people, continue to drill, continue to love drill, but let's take that discipline and let's use it in our personal lives. Let's strive to be the best Muslim. And that way the spirit, and that's another thing when you asked me earlier about the spirit with some of the other drill instructors, you know, there was never animosity, because at the end of the day, I believe we were all striving to be soldiers. We were striving to be helpers of the minister. And because of that spirit, Allah blessed us to have a camaraderie that it didn't get street. It didn't get Negro. It didn't get, you know what I'm saying? It didn't get to the point where we were set tripping, even though we're in the mosque. Of course, we wanted to win, but Islam has to come first. And I would say, like one of the brothers, the pioneers in Detroit, Brother John Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him. When I came into Islam, he was like a stalwart in Detroit and a pillar, but he used to always say to hold on to the plow handle of Islam, you know, and the Quran says it like this. It says, hold on to the rope of Islam. And so to all of the young drillers, you know, hold on to the rope of Islam. Your drill is a manifestation of your practice. So let's keep the practice and let's keep the drill. And may Allah bless us with a successful Savior's Day 2019. Yes, sir.
Excellent. One last question, Brother Christopher. Sir. What do you want your legacy to be, as far as how would you like to be remembered, sir?
Oh, wow. I would love to be, I don't even think about that, but if I had to answer that question, I would say I would want my legacy to be, man, he was a strong, consistent, you know, helper, loving helper of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, you know, and he always strove to live by his example. You know, that would be the best legacy that I could leave. If I could leave that legacy, that's what I would say. And in terms of drill, you know, man, I'm a soldier. I'm a soldier, and I don't have any problem falling in and drilling. You can ask anybody. The true D.I loves to drill. He doesn't, look, if Brother Michael in Chicago is calling one day, or the regional captain here, or whoever, man, I love to drill. I love elimination. Yes, you know, yes. I love to be the last man standing. I'm competitive, but I'm a soldier. I love to fall in and just drill and carry it out. And so, you know, that would be my legacy, man. He was a you know, good DI, praise be to Allah, but he was a soldier first. So.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching. Bro Christopher, we're going to put this on YouTube. I know that people are very inspired by your words and your actions as well. And we look forward to seeing you at Savior's Day next week. And thank you for taking time out of your day. Please give your family the greetings. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, sir. Happy Savior's Day.
Happy Savior's Day to you as well.